Deputy First Minister, Ministers, members, and in particular members of the Barnhill and Wilson families, can I welcome you here to Parliament Buildings on what I think is a very important day for all of us here. It's important for those of you who are members and friends of the Barnhill and Wilson families, but it's also a very important day, I think, for the Assembly and for its elected representatives. In particular, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Patrick Barnhill, Jack Barnhill's nephew and his wife, and Paul Wilson, Paddy Wilson's son and his wife. Since the Assembly Commission decided to commemorate the two former senators in this way, these two family, friends and members have been our points of contact, and we appreciate very much the assistance that they have given to us in preparing the commemorative inscriptions and in making arrangements for today. I'd also like to welcome our other invited guests, and in particular the Deputy First Minister, Mark Durkan, and Minister Nesbitt, who is here on behalf of the First Minister, Mr Trimble, and also other members, particularly the members of the Assembly Commission who are here, and our own staff, because they have put a lot of work into today, a lot of preparation too. We did think about trying to track down all the other members of the Senate who were serving at the time that Paddy Wilson and Jack Barnhill were here. But I'm afraid we discovered this was just too substantial a task for us. However, in a kind of representative capacity, I'm very pleased indeed to welcome John Kennedy. John, of course, was clerk to the Parliament, but at the time he was clerk assistant. And as our own Murray Barnes knows, that's a very, very important position in the Assembly. And it's a great pleasure to have John here because he knew the two senators and worked very closely with them as a senior official. The timing of today's ceremony is, of course, very particular and important, because it is 30 years ago today that Jack Barnhill was so tragically killed. And the Assembly Commission thought that today was the most appropriate time that we could find to commemorate both Jack Barnhill and Paddy Wilson. I hope today will be a special day for the two families, but I do believe that the ceremony has wider significance for the Assembly and for the Northern Ireland community. We're gathered here to commemorate two politicians who had very different political beliefs, but they did both want to bring a better quality of life for all the people of Northern Ireland. It's not the first time that politicians have been honoured in this way in Parliament Buildings. When you go on the tour a little bit later, you will see commemorative inscriptions in the Commons lobby to Sir Norman Strong, a former Speaker, and to Edgar Graham. I know that these kinds of commemorative inscriptions can have great and powerful meaning. I know that because Edgar Graham was a close personal friend of mine. He and I ran the Debating Society in Ballymena Academy together, a kind of preparation, I suppose, for the Assembly much later on. And I spent many rather scratchy years in the violin section of the orchestra with his sister Anne Graham. These commemorative inscriptions are very powerful and very important. And this will be the first time that there will be inscriptions in the very fabric of this building to representatives of the two most significant strands of our divided community, side by side, etched into the very fabric of this building. I think that's powerful, and I think it's important. I'd like to say a few words about Jack Barnhill and Paddy Wilson. Jack Barnhill didn't enter political life until he was 57 years old. He had a very successful career in the potato feed and seed business. And he was elected to the Senate in 1962. He became Deputy Speaker during the period 67 to 68. And he will be remembered not only because of his rather substantial physical presence, but because of his humanity and his political ability. He received many accolades from his political colleagues after his death. The leader of the House at the time, Senator Andrews, referred to him as a genial, burly figure whose place in the Senate will be very hard to fill. Senator Elder described him as a giant of a man in physique, and a giant in his political and social thinking, which made him acceptable to people of all shades of opinion. Jack Barnhill will also be remembered as a speaker who laced his speeches with poetic quotations. The first quotation he used in the Senate chamber was from Shelley. if winter comes, can spring be far behind? On this cold and frosty morning, it's a pertinent quotation to remember. But at this time, when we look forward from a frosty political past to what we hope will be a more stable political future, it is an especially poignant quotation to remember. I believe that the words that the Barnhill family have chosen for the inscription are a very suitable representation of the way Senator Jack Barnhill lived his life. Honour, integrity, compassion. Paddy Wilson entered political life at a much earlier age. In 1964, when he was only 31 years of age, he stood for the Northern Ireland Labour Party in the Dock Ward. It wasn't his most successful political venture. I'm afraid he almost lost his deposit. And shortly after the result, Paddy, accompanied by his son Paul, who is with us today, bumped into Jerry Fitt coming out of St. Patrick's Church. And after some cajoling and banter, and knowing of the two men concerned, I don't think that's a surprise, Paddy joined Jerry Fitt in the Republican Labour Party. And in Lord Fitt's own words, they became like Siamese twins. I'm very pleased that my colleague in another place, Lord Fitt, has been able to join us today. Paddy Wilson became Jerry's election agent, and in 1969 helped him to attain his Stormont seat. 1969 was also the year in which Paddy Wilson became a senator in this place. He was also a member of Belfast City Council. In 1970 he helped to form the SDLP, and during the 1973 Assembly elections Paddy was Jerry Fitt's election agent. It was just at that time, in the summer of 1973, that he was so tragically and horribly killed. Paddy was deeply respected by his political colleagues across the political divide. And after his death, Brian Faulkner paid this tribute. I knew Paddy Wilson ever since he first came to Stormont. He was one of the most human and good-natured of men. Again, I believe the Wilson family have chosen a very apt quotation for his inscription. Equality, tolerance, respect. Unfortunately, the First Minister, David Trimble, cannot be with us today. However, I'm delighted that Deputy First Minister Mark Durkan and Minister Dermot Nesbitt, representing the First Minister, have been able to join us. I would like to invite now the Deputy First Minister to address us, and then to ask Minister Nesbitt on behalf of the First Minister to speak to us also. Minister Durkan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for those introductory remarks. I want to begin by saying that it is with a sense of privilege that I am here today on behalf of the Executive to take part in this very special ceremony to honour and to remember the late Senator Jack Barnhill and the late Senator Paddy Wilson, who were tragically murdered back in the early 1970s. Obviously, I want to join with the Speaker in particularly welcoming the members of the Barnhill and Wilson families to Parliament buildings this morning. And I know that for them this is going to be a moving occasion and a proud occasion, but obviously there will be many struggling emotions within that pride and that ongoing and that enduring sadness of grief will be there as well. And everyone who is here today to join you in remembering your loved ones shares those emotions too. It really is important that at a time when we are trying to look forward with political change and trying to create new circumstances for our whole community, it really is important that we do not forget anyone who has suffered during the course of the last 30 years. And we need in particular to remember those who have lost their lives, those who have lost loved ones, and we have to provide support and services to all those to all of those victims. And I know that many victims feel in much of the language that has been currency nowadays that they are being left in some sort of state of forgottenhood. And today is one small way in which we're making very clear to people in this assembly that forgottenhood is not to be the status of victims. And I think that this step that has been taken by the Assembly Commission, this corrective step in commemorative terms, is very, very welcome, and the Commission are to be entirely commended for that. For the Executive's part, I want to say that we're committed to doing all that we can to help to build a society where the suffering of victims is fully and properly recognised, and we have to do more to fully understand and express that suffering, and to ensure that we have a community that recognises the pain of the past, and that also tries to draw all relevant lessons of that for the future. And as an administration, we want to make sure that we provide, in conjunction with others, support and services in a sensitive but also a proactive manner to meet the needs of victims. We have come a long way since the time when the two late senators lost their lives. This Assembly, and indeed its Executive, are powerful examples of how people with deep differences, and how in a very diverse society we can actually work effectively together with mutual respect, achieve mutual regard and recognition, and ensure that the identity and ethos of all sections of the community are properly expressed and respected. This memorial to Senator Barnhill and Senator Wilson really is a fitting tribute to their memory. It will also be a constant reminder to everyone of the pain and loss suffered by their families. And as the Speaker has said, it will also be symbolic of the pain and suffering of so many others right across this community, because the grief of victims, the suffering of victims knows no community boundaries. I think we can pay no greater tribute to the two late senators than by resolving to strive to ensure that the awful circumstances and conditions that led to their deaths will never be allowed to arise again. And I'm conscious today that murder has visited two more families. So the awfulness of violence isn't yet behind us, just as the pain suffered by the awfulness, the pain caused by the awfulness of violence will never be behind the victims and those who have lost loved ones. But I hope that this tribute today will offer some comfort, and I hope the presence of so many today will offer some solidarity to both Barnhill and the Wilson family. And this memorial will certainly be an inspiration and a pause for reflection for all the many of us who pass by here so often. And again, I want to thank the families for their presence, and to commend the Commission for taking this step. And now pass down to say.
Mark, first of all, I do reiterate the apology for David Trimble, First Minister, for not being here today. He is in Oslo with John Hume, with a commemoration of the 100 years of the Nobel Peace Prize, and that is where he is. I reiterate what has been said and welcome the two families, the two late senators here today as well. Indeed, it is an opportunity at times like this to reflect somewhat on what we represent standing around here today. As the Speaker has said, it was this week that Senator Barnhill died. It was also this week that Edgar Grimm died as well. It was also this week, and I look to Jerry, when way back in 1973, that he, along with Brian Faulkner and the then on Taoiseach Liam Cosgrave and the then Prime Minister Edward Heath, tried to move forward a process of reconciliation in Northern Ireland. But it only lasted a few months until May 1974. But there's one poignant reason I remember particularly, because at the time, that week in 1973, when Senator Wilson was killed as election agent for Jerry Fitt, I at that time was acting as election agent for Brian Faulkner. Therefore, I do remember those few days when one election agent was killed, I had thoughts and concerns for those. I vividly remember that week when Senator Wilson, the late Senator Wilson, was killed. So yes, this is a time to remember. Indeed, I was standing talking with Edgar Graham when he was shot dead as well. So I do have memories, very sad memories, of this week, those times, and the deaths that we're commemorating here today. But that's one side of the coin. As Mark has said, it is a measure of where we've come. That Mark, the successor to the then previous leaders of SDLP, and I representing David Trimble, the successor of previous leaders then as well, that we are hopefully moving forward together. We represent an administration collectively. I speak on behalf of the wide administration, as does Mark. That is a measure of how far we've come. Of course, we do recognise, having come a distance since 1973, we still have some way to go. But we are hopefully all on a road to peace, stability, empathy one with another, understanding one with another, and above all, one word would encapsulate what we look for, and that is normality in the society in which we all live here in Northern Ireland. A final word I just wish to say about victims in an aspect, because the families here represent victims of what were some of the first people killed in what became known as the Troubles. Many deaths have occurred since then. I have only been peripherally touched by deaths, and I've mentioned the two. I've not been centrally affected. Therefore, I cannot begin to understand or comprehend those who have lost loved ones in these Troubles. I meet victims quite often in the position I hold. And yes, some are quite angry. That's fully understandable, the anger that they have. But there are also other victims as well whom I meet who are compassionate and who think of the future. And they say to me one simple message. They say, let us not be visited upon others what was visited upon us, the trauma of having a loved one killed. And therefore that is why I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be here with Mark and for both of us to represent the administration and what we hope will be achieved by working together in Northern Ireland. That what we witness in a moment, those who died, will not be repeated again, and therefore we will have what we all wish for, normality. I thank you for coming. I thank Lord Fitt as well for coming. When I look at him, it brings back memories of he and Brian Faulkner when they, shall we say, Jerry, joisted with one another, or joisted, combined with one another. But yes, indeed, I thank you for coming, and I now hand back to the Speaker. Thank you very much.
Well, we've now come to what is, of course, the most important part of the ceremony, where the Barnhill and Wilson families will unveil the inscriptions. Now, we thought about separate unveilings for each of the two inscriptions, but then we decided it would be much more appropriate, and in keeping with the way both of these men lived their lives, and in keeping also with the future we want to build, that the two families together would unveil the two inscriptions. And so I would like to invite Patrick Barnhill and his wife to come forward to one side of the curtains here, and Paul Wilson and his wife to come forward to the other side here. And I will ask you now if you will unveil the inscriptions, please. Thank all of you for attending the ceremony, and I want to thank Patrick and Paul and their wives particularly for playing their part, and for the Deputy First Minister and Mr. Nesbitt. I think probably a number of you would like to take some pictures, and there's an opportunity for you to do that yourselves, but we also have a photographer here who will take pictures of those who wish. Maybe some of those who are members
previous officials, and of course members of the families. And so please be at your ease here and use the opportunity. We have a videotape being taken, and that is particularly for the families, because we felt that this would be something that would be interesting to them. It's been, I think, an important event, commemorating two who died in the civil and political unrest, commemorating them for themselves, for what they stood for, and also, as the Deputy First Minister and Mr Nesbitt have said, because of who they represent, all our people. Politics, as ought to be clear from watching this place function, is not about agreeing with each other. It's about disagreeing without killing each other. And their deaths are an emblem of what happens when politics fails and falls apart. You are here today commemorating two people who stood for democratic politics, who in a very real way gave their lives for democratic politics. I thank you for being present here today. There's going to be a tour in a short time for those who wish to go on it, starting here at the Senate chamber and going around the other public parts of the building. There'll be a light lunch in the private dining room upstairs, and I hope to meet you there. There's going to be a carol service at 1 o'clock, to which all of you are welcome, along with all the members and officials and staff in the building. It will be in the Senate chamber here. But on my own behalf and on behalf of my colleagues in the Assembly Commission and in the Assembly here, can I wish you on this important and I trust auspicious day a very happy Christmas and a peaceful New Year.